Here I have three Retina Xenar f2.8 50mm lenses. This is the earliest style, smooth edge on the front. This is a later style, it's got a knurled edge, but it's still got the focus button there, lever if you like. This is a later style, this is one that has no focus lever on it at all, and they differ slightly. These two you can use on your Retina IIIS rangefinder camera, because you can see that they have the cam here to couple to the rangefinder. This one's come from a Reflex 4 camera, and it's got no cam. There's no provision for a cam there to couple to the rangefinder. The serial number gives it away because it's 9 million it starts at. Well, the other ones are considerably earlier than that. 6.6 million, 5.9 million. So these may differ slightly in their construction. We'll pull the three of them apart. As I say, this one is not going to be any use to on a Retina IIIS camera. It'll be fine on any of the Retina Reflex, the S, the 3, the 4, or indeed the Instamatic Reflex, but there's not many of those being used these days. Right, so we'll start with the earliest one, I think, and I'll show you how to get into it. Well, where you start here is we need to remove this black conical section on the inside, and you need a friction tool for that. This is a friction tool. They're available in sets. You'll see them in various colours. This just happens to be the set that I've got. So if I apply a bit of force to that, that loosened up nicely, and now I can spin that out. Or I'll just get a toothpick, spin it round with that. Don't be poking at the rings with a pair of tweezers or some other metal tool. You will end up scratching them, and then you won't like the result. Okay, so that comes out, and this piece lifts out. That bayonet there is where your lens hood would bayonet on. So we'll put those pieces to one side, and here's what we see underneath. This is the outer helical here, and you can see it's held in place with 3 screws and washers. Now that's where you would make any focus adjustment on this lens. I can see a little alignment mark scratches just there, which tells me that someone has serviced this one before, and they've made marks to help them line things back afterwards. They didn't necessarily go back in the same place they started off, because this is a multi-start, this thread, so they could have started in a different position. However, that's lens number 1. Lens number 2. Let's see if this is much the same. Friction tool. Does that come loose? No, it's going to need a bit more oomph, I think. That one is not moving. Now that's unusual. I'm looking around the outside edge of that. I wonder whether that's been painted. If that front ring's been painted, the paint may have run down into that edge. Alright, I'll have another look at this. I'll put a drop of solvent down this edge here, which is not where I'd expect it to be screwed into, but I suspect there's something there. It looks like a trace of paint. I'll put a drop of solvent there and have another go. Let's try this. Of course you won't be spraying stuff from a can like me, because you'll be doing it carefully. I'll just roll that drop around, let that wick in around that edge. Dry that off with a paper towel and try my friction tool again. That's not moving at all. That is very unusual. Okay. I'll have to have a close look at this and see what I can see. Well, wiping around that ring with a bit of solvent, you can see that there's a lot of paint coming off there. Which tells me that my guess is probably correct, that someone has painted that front ring in place and it's probably run around the edges and is now locking that in position. I'm going to try some drops of acetone around there, see if I can melt that paint. Okay, well, we'll try a little drop of acetone around this edge. Acetone's a bit exciting to use because you can end up getting it on paint you'd rather not have had it on, and then you might find that suddenly you have no numbers on the scale ring or something of that nature, which would be a bother and a nuisance. Okay, let's try again. Nothing. Oh, there it came, loose. So acetone was our friend there. So this cone, it looks like the whole surface of that's been repainted and paint's run down around the edges here. Let's get that off. So there's the filter, the hood mount and a conical section. I'll put those to one side. And the lens looks much the same as lens number 1. Lens number 3. Let's see if this one fights me. Now this is different construction. Okay, this lens quite a different construction. You can see that we've got a notch here and here. So I think a lens spanner might be the tool to use here. No, it's just sitting on my... We'll try this. But I think a lens spanner might be the weapon of choice. Oh no, that's loose. So the friction tool did it for us. It's quite a different construction. Lift off their hood mount here, and you can see it's retained with this very small conical section. So that's lens number 3. Under here it looks much the same. That's back to lens number 1, and we'll start taking the lens itself apart now that we're in. Well, I'll be setting up the focus on this lens later. If you didn't want to do that with a ground glass screen or whatever method you're going to use, then you could mark this ring carefully And it would also pay to take a measurement at this distance so that you know that you're approximately right when you come back to your mark, because this ring can start in any number of positions. I forget how many it is. Might be 6 starts, something like that. So getting it back in the right start position is always entertaining. I'm not going to take any notice of that because I'm going to use a Retina Reflex 4 that I have, which is nicely set up, and I'll use that to judge when I've got the lens in focus. So these 3 screws and their washers come off, and the lens capsule, complete without a helical, will come out of the mount. So a quick inspection of this. The aperture moves nicely. Now avoid the temptation of opening this fully out and letting it snap shut. Those diaphragms are quite easily damaged. They won't like the shock of that. I'm just checking here to see what the grease feels like. It's relatively smooth. That's quite good. I'm going to take that all apart and clean it anyway. Quite often you don't have to open the lens capsule itself and clean the glass. It's often not necessary. So we'll pop that aside. And here's the mount, if you like. Right, put number 1 aside. Let's see what number 2 looks like. Same again, 3 screws. This looks a bit dirtier on the glass, but that's probably from all the fighting and bits of rubber that have come off the friction tool while I was trying to get that piece out. The lens capsule looks substantially the same. Diaphragm moves freely. Focus is very stiff. Certainly needs to be cleaned up. The body here, not much to see, looks much the same. Camera number 3, or lens number 3, this is our one from the Reflex 4. It does look different in here. Basically we've got the same deal here with our focus ring. It does look to be a different, might be a different shape. Let me have a close look. Yes, it certainly is. So the outer helical is certainly a different shape. Same method is used to adjust the focus. The lens capsule out. Let's have a look at that. The outer helical moves quite freely, that's not bad at all. The lens capsule, does that look much different? To tell the truth, it looks much the same. But this ring here certainly looks different. And this piece, how different is that? It doesn't look all that different from this end. That's back to number 1. Let's start getting this stripped down from the back. This is the exciting stuff. We've got 4 screws. They are all the same length. You may find that this screw in this position is painted red. That's quite normal. It's quite a useful thing to do. It can also be a disguise if you make a mess of one of the screw heads. Put it in that position and cover it with paint. Right, so the 4 screws are off. Let's lift the back off this. Now, normally that ring wouldn't have come off like that. So let's pop that back where it will have come from. That will have sat. I'll just reassemble this so we can show you what it would have looked like if it hadn't flown apart. That's it. That would have sat there. This ring, grey side up, would have sat there like that. This ring would have sat on there like that. This little tab that you might be able to see there, that couples with this, which is our rangefinder cam. So let's put setting number 1 to one side. Lens number 2, this is the one with the knurled edge on the front, but it does have the focus button and otherwise appears to be much the same. Yeah, this one's coming apart on me too, just to confuse people. Again, we've got our cam here for the rangefinder. This is very stiff. And this would have been the source of the stiffness with the focus with this particular lens. That's lens number 2. The innards in here, they all look much the same. Lens number 3. This is the one from the Reflex 4. It doesn't have the cam for the rangefinder. We know that the fixing for the focus, the filter mount at the front, the hood mount at the front is different. This one has certainly been serviced before, I'd say, judging from that red dot. Right, it's been. That one didn't come apart in 1,000 different pieces. Okay. Basically you can see that there's a slight difference here. We have no cam at all and no provision for a cam. That piece is not machined out. Obviously there's a difference here in that we haven't got these pieces in that nice dark grey colour. Everything else looks much the same there. So that was lens number 3. I'll just put these screws aside where they belong. get into the guts of this. Start with lens number 1. Let's lift these pieces off. Now what I normally do with these pieces, I'll zoom you out a little bit. When I'm taking these apart, is I lay them down in the order they come off, so that you know exactly which piece goes back next. This piece should come off with its spring, but try not to lose that. This piece, this is one of our depth of field pointers. It doesn't want to wriggle out of its slot there. Not sure what the secret is. It might be the difference between lens 1 and lens 2 actually. So that depth of field pointer doesn't want to wriggle out of its position. I've just moved that all the way to the other end of its scale, see if that'll help me. Yeah, it's come out now, but that was a wriggle. You've got this little cam. This separator, which sits between the two depth of field pointers, you can see it's got a reduced section here which actually runs past those gears. It's got a little notch there which sits on a tab right there on that rail. We can unhook this spring. Well, that's come off, that's handy. Usually it stays fixed to that post, and it's a liability because it's easily damaged. Okay, this depth of field pointer, like the other one, is awkward to get out. Yeah, you gotta be careful not to bend these things. If they're less than flat, they won't go well. Okay, so now we're down to the basics there. You can see that our focus scale here is held into the mount with 4 little brackets, 4 little clamps. Now they're a green colour. Now that's some anti-friction coating. I don't know that it's Teflon, it's something Teflon-like, you might say. There's a stop built in here, so this can't rotate past its set positions. So there we go, that's lens number 1. I'll push those pieces to the back, keeping them carefully in place. Let's have a look at lens number 2. Lens number 2 may be pretty much the same. You've got this. Take that ring off. Take that ring off. And hook that spring. Lift this piece off. The pin on that couples to that small cam thing there. Depth of field pointer number 1 lifts out without any argument at all. Lift our little cam out. The spacer is the same. Unhook the spring. Depth of field pointer number 2. Get this out, it's wriggling it past this gear set's often awkward. Here we go. That lifts out. And we've got the same arrangement here. That spring's probably going to stay on its post. 4 tabs which lock the focus scale ring into place. Now you can hear that squeak, listen. Yeah, that means this is dry and unlubricated basically where those tabs are. There's some friction there, maybe dust in there. If there was any lubricant it's dried out. But it makes a squeaking sound. So that's certainly going to be need to be addressed. Let's pop that to one side. It's starting to get exciting now. I've got pieces all over the bench. Lens number 3. Much the same, different colours of course. Right, lens number 3. I've had to do this twice because I ran into a file size limit. And when I restarted the camera, it didn't start recording. So we're back where we started with this one. These pieces come off in much the same order. Here's our depth of field pointer. The cam here is plastic, looks like nylon to me. The separator here is very much the same, just a different colour. Unhook that spring and lift out depth of field pointer number 1, or 2 in this case, depending on how you do it. Now you can see the differences here. Let's bring back in, we'll bring back in lens number 2 because lens number 1 and 2 are very much the same. You can see here we had 4 metal tabs that held the front and rear section together, the focus scale ring. Here we have a plastic ring doing the same job as those 4 metal tabs, and then these little brass tabs here are holding the plastic ring in position. So that's certainly a difference there in construction. Sounds a bit squeaky. Feels a little bit tight, but it's smooth enough. I'd say probably there's a bit of dust got in there and that will certainly need to be cleaned. But that's the 3 different lenses taken apart as far as we need to. Let's just get into the next bit. Let's start splitting the front and the rear.